What's up, beautiful people, to another episode of the Ricky Jones Jr. Podcast. It's me, Ricky Jones Jr., and as you can see, I have to my left, maybe you're right, my oh so lovely wife, Chrystle Jones. How you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing good.
That's good. I'm glad that you are here today. We're going to have a little bit of fun. Before we do have the fun, I do want to do a shout out today. And so, as y'all know, I do like to start off with shout outs, and the shout outs come for people who do comment either on the YouTube videos or make comments on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And so this one comes from YouTube, and it comes actually from my family member, right, who has a YouTube channel called Better Body Tips. So shouts out to you for commenting on my video, and I'll put links down below for their YouTube channel that you can go support and show love to them. Okay, so hey, we're here for that. Family unity coming together. So at the end of the day, we're here to talk about transitions, right? Largely because this is the ending part of May, which means a lot of people are graduating either high school, but then even college, and then the list goes on, right? And then even now, right, it's kind of, I don't know if it's still known as, maybe you do know, but if it's known as like the Great Migration or the Great, what is it called? Where people, resignation.
Oh.
What's it called? The Great
Resignation.
The Great Resignation. Is it still a thing right now?
I don't know.
Okay, so times past, right? Not too far in the past. It was known as the Great Recession. Wow, got him. The Great Resignation. Thanks. So even with that being said, that lets us know of other types of, transitions people are dealing with. And so, I mean, the list goes on, the litany goes on. So we're going to talk about a few. And so one of them that I want to talk about with is for those that are transitioning out of college. Now, that could be for many reasons. It could be because you graduated, or it could be because you realize it just wasn't for you, which has its own situations of itself. But all for those that have graduated college, shouts out to you. Even for those who didn't, man, like shouts out to you for trying for whatever reason that you have to get out. Shouts out to you for making the attempt. But for those that have graduated, like, man, you are now about to endeavor upon life beyond school, which is a huge transition in itself, because school has its own like buffer system, its own like structure that keeps you track, right? You're going to go to a certain amount of classes, what time your classes are, where you need to be, the schoolwork you're going to have, with the syllabus and everything. But once you graduate, it's yourself, your job, whatever you choose to do, your entrepreneur endeavor, whatever it is that you're doing, it's you and that is what you're doing each and every day. Now I transitioned from college and went to school pretty much immediately, but I know you didn't do it immediately.
You say from college, like you went from your undergrad to your master.
Right, right. And so yours wasn't like that, was it?
No, I took some time off.
Right. So how was that like transition time for you once you graduated from college?
Well, I was already working.
Gotcha.
So
while in college. Okay.
Yeah, I basically always worked since I graduated from high school. So I was already working. So for me, when I graduated, I just continued. I continued to work even in between that time of transitioning or, going back to school for my master's. So I think that helped the transition be smoother because I was already working. So I wasn't, out of a job and then out of school and just out.
Right. Trying to figure it out.
Right. I was working, but yeah, so that's for me it was a pretty smooth transition.
And so you were working, you graduated from college working the same job you were working while in college. Oh.
Yes.
Well, that worked out.
Yes. And I think a lot of people actually do that. Like, if you plan well, you'll a lot of times either finish off with an internship at a place and then hopefully, get offered a position there, because going into the internship, you let them know you're in your final years.
Right.
And, you're wondering, can this turn into a job opportunity at the end in the next 6 months or whatever that time frame is. So if you're about to be graduating, that's just a tip. Like when you're looking at internships and things like that in your final years, like seeing, hey, I'm going to be done in X amount of months. Like, is this going to be able to transition into a job opportunity if I show, as I'm spending my time here doing my work, that I can do well.
That's good.
So I think that's really important to think about. So yeah, it definitely made it easier. And then as well, you don't have as many people not being able to work in the field that
That's true.
Their degree is actually in. Again, a lot of that ends up when people wait until after they graduate. They're trying to find a job. They're out of that bubble, if you will, of college. And it's like, well, no, you're adulting and you need to make money. You're not getting that financial aid or whatever you were before. And so now you end up doing fill in the blank just so you can get a check, and you don't have the liberty or the time to try to find something that's actually in your field. And then before you know it, years later, you're just doing this random thing.
Very true. And, you know, that has its own situations and repercussions. But even with that, you're right. Because even when I finished college, I had the idea that I wanted to go into the military. And to go into the military, the job that I wanted to have as a chaplain, I had to have my master's. So that led me to then pursue my master's immediately after college. So even depending on what it is that you want to do, it may have you to transition to something rather immediately or flow into what you were already doing within your undergraduate school of studies, right? Your latter part of the year. So there's that transition. But even with that, you have to make your moves. You have to leave the campus, which is huge. Well, for me, it was huge because I loved LSU's campus and just the overall environment, right? Because I was a Georgia boy. I say was because now I'm like a Florida boy, I guess. I mean, I've been here long enough to say that. But I was a Georgia boy. That relocation to Louisiana, and I loved it. Like, it was a breath of fresh air. And I knew I was going to go back to Georgia because life was just a little bit easier there to make the transition. So even with that, right, there's a transition and stuff. You have to figure out ways to make life better for you. It didn't make sense for me to stay in Louisiana and acquire all of these different loans and debt and things like that. To go into my master's program, I could just go home and stay with my parents. Thankfully, I was able to go back to my parents and not have to pay for rent and all that good stuff. But I could save money while planning to make money by going into my master's program. So, I mean, those right there, so many different transitions for you all that may be transitioning now out of college. Not even trying to think back to high school. Like, that was just a blur. Like, anything stands out to you from that transition?
Yeah, after I graduated, I went to Atlanta.
Gotcha.
And I stayed with my god sister. So, and I worked. I worked at a summer camp.
Nice.
So I guess for me, I like the idea of adulting. So I was happy to go to Atlanta. So yeah, after I graduated. So
when you say adulting, what does that mean? I like the idea of adulting. I like
living on my own, making my own decisions. I've definitely always been the type of person that, if I believe in a decision that I'm making, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, I'm willing to stand behind the repercussions of that decision. And I think that's a big part of adulting, not just, I get to live where I want, do what I want, you know, all those things. But being responsible enough to say, and okay, I understand whatever decisions I make, good, bad, whatever, I can, you know, manage and work my way through them as an adult and continue to make decisions. And so I was happy, like I said, to be an adult and be able to make my own choices and my own decisions. So yeah, after I graduated from high school, really soon after, like probably within a week,
oh nice,
I moved to Atlanta.
Nice.
And So I was in Atlanta and I was there for the whole summer, like I said, with my god sister. And then I came back to Tampa and I went to community college for 2 years. And then I moved back to Atlanta to finish my bachelor's degree at a 4-year university at Georgia State University.
Nice.
And then that's when I graduated from there. But yeah, so for me, even out of high school, I just remember wanting to be an adult and wanting to take that transition. And so if there are any younger people on the podcast that are listening, I would just say, one, know that it's totally fine if you're like, no, I know I want to adult and I want to do my thing. Just be expecting and be willing on the other side of that to, one, do what you need to do. Adulting, I worked. And then two, be willing to take responsibility for your adult decision, because ultimately being so adamant about that decision may mean that your parents are like, okay, well, our thing is you can stay as long as you need to, but once you leave, you leave. And so if that's your parents' thing, make sure that, you know, that's a decision that you want to make.
Correct.
And you're willing to back that up and do whatever, you know, whatever comes with that. If your parents are the type that are like, no, you can come back, which my parents are like, oh, okay, come back. I didn't actually really want to come back that much. But I knew it was necessary because I wanted to go to community college, start school and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so even then, that was a part of a adult reasonable decision. I knew I didn't want to drift through life working random jobs. So I did want to get higher education. And so it was like, okay, this is a wise decision to go back home so that I can do these different things so that, again, I can work. And I didn't even stay at home that whole time. I want to say I stayed at home a couple months and then I moved out and got a place. So,
gotcha.
Even when I was back in Tampa, I didn't always stay with my parents. But so yeah, for younger people that are watching, I would say just make sure you have a plan and be willing to take responsibility. And then for parents that are watching that may be parenting teenagers, I would say if you have a child that's like me, that's adamant about, no, I want to go and I want to adult, let them adult. Let them adult. Help them when you feel like you should in ways that God is leading you to. But at the same time, you know, don't be a crutch for them. My parents definitely were not a crutch for me.
Wow.
When I said I wanted to leave and I wanted to go, you know, it was it was a mutual, you should leave, I want to leave. So, you know.
So that ended well.
So if your child is saying that they want to leave, let them leave, but let them adult. I wasn't, I want to leave, but then send me checks every month. No, I had to get a job and I had responsibilities and I had to pay, you know, for these different things. I stayed with my god sister, but I paid her rent. You know what I mean? So make sure that it wasn't astronomical. She's my god sister. But, you know, again, my parents weren't sending me that money that I was paying her. Like, I was choosing to adult. And so they were like, okay, adult. So I would say let them, don't discourage them from doing that.
Yeah.
If they want to, try to just respect the fact that they are adults. If they're 18 and they graduate and they're adults, they say they want to leave, let them leave. Keeping them home is when they already communicated they want to leave is only going to frustrate everyone.
No, so true. Not even love the aspect of transition where you were there in Atlanta, came back to go to community college, finished community college, and then went back to Atlanta, which is a transition in itself to go from community college to a 4-year college institute, right? And so that had its own scenario. So like, was it a rough one, tough one, or were you already schooling it? So it was like, okay, this is another level of school.
For me, it was easy. So like I said, I came back to Tampa, and then I started going to community college. I actually, as soon as I found out I did not have to stay in community college for 2 years, I was like, they're like, no, you just need, I think I just needed like 30 credits or something like that. And I was like,
so 2 semesters, really.
All I need is 30 credits. So it's literally, as soon as I found that out, I applied. I applied to leave because I wanted to leave.
Oh, to go to state.
Yes. So as soon as I saw my counselor and they're like, oh, no, you only need 30 credits, I was like, oh, I have 30 credits. And I was always a pretty good student. So I had A's and stuff like that. So A's and B's. So it was no issue. So I applied. I got in. And thankfully, again, my parents, they were big on education. They were big on helping us if we were doing something productive. And so they did help me pay when I went to community college. And they paid for my tuition when I went to Georgia State as well. They were like, okay, we'll pay for that. Like, you're doing that. That's productive. We'll pay for that. So they did pay for that. So when I got up to Atlanta, got my dorm and everything situated, I would say the biggest transition with that was just the paperwork, the paperwork of school, transcripts and all of that. But when I went up there, I stayed on campus my first semester because my mom was like, no, you should stay on campus your first semester. And in retrospect, I'm really glad she said that. I wish I would have stayed on campus longer.
Respect. I get it.
I stayed on campus my first semester, but then after that I got a apartment.
Apartments, right? I'm gonna say apartments because every time we go to Atlanta, so obviously she went there. My parents, right? They still live there, so we still visit. And we could be right down the city of Atlanta, and Chrystle has probably stayed at, if I'm just counting off the top, probably like 8 or 10 different apartments.
Not 10.
They, like every time we drive, we like, oh, I used to stay there for a little bit. Like, wait, what? How did you stay there for a little bit? What does that mean? I stayed there for a little bit. Oh, me and my roommate, she'll name roommate, stayed there. Yada. I'm like, how, Sway? But nonetheless, I mean, that was my number, but you may know the real number. But I'm gonna stick with my number.
He said I'm gonna stick with my number. I was gonna say like 5, but I mean, ultimately,
even when I met you, you had then we had stayed in 3 apartments in Atlanta. So
I didn't know you were counting us.
I'm not counting that, but I'm just saying it to say how I can see how quickly you can move, right? And I just mean move in general. But all like that segues to one of my biggest transitions, which was when we were married, right? And I say it was a big transition. You know, it was a big one because one,
I had a lot of transitions before we got married.
No, it's cool. Okay,
I left the country and everything.
Right? Okay, so what would you say was your biggest transition?
I would say...
I think I have 2, but...
Maybe prior to marriage, I would say one of the biggest transitions I made was moving out of the country.
Gotcha.
Because, yeah, that's... A lot of people, unless you're in the military, you don't just up and move out of the country.
Right.
So that was a big transition for me. Obviously, I couldn't be on the phone and all that stuff, cause especially back then, there were like international plans. And
what do you mean back then? You're not old.
I'm saying like, but we're going on 8 years of marriage, so this was at least 10 years ago.
Okay.
Like,
just put it in perspective, okay? 2012, international plans wasn't like a thing, right?
So, I mean...
I'm just making sure, people don't think you're, like, ancient old.
Oh, I'm
35. You said back then, like, it was a long time ago, but nonetheless, within a decade, there was an international calling.
I mean, we are kind of talking about back then, though, because you have to think, when we were in college, or I'm 2 years older than you, so... I know for me, I remember in my freshman year, or not freshman year, but so I was in my sophomore, junior year. When I first got to Georgia State, iPhones just came out.
Okay.
There were no iPhones. So that's back then.
I mean, there's that, but it was international calling back then.
Right, you could, but I'm just saying, like, it was really, really expensive, so that wasn't, I couldn't just call home, like, hey, so I miss everybody, so what's going on? Like, no, like, calls were, like, once a week. I might call for like
there you go
10 minutes and it was in a designated location. Like I didn't have my phone. So
but there, to your point, there was a time before iPhones, which was still a good time because I mean there was the Palm Trio and there was the BlackBerry, which I have both and love both. So said all that to say, like, yeah, there was a time for an iPhone, but I mean, hey.
You weren't gonna picture, like, FaceTime and all that, that's what I'm saying.
No, you weren't gonna do that. If you had BlackBerry, you had that BBM chat, right? But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, so I would say that was definitely one of my biggest transitions. I was only gone, like, a couple months, like, 4 months or so, but that was cool. That was a big transition because, like I said, just literally...
Right, by yourself, too.
I went for a program. I was in a program, but yeah, I didn't go with anybody that I knew.
Right.
So...
Which is another piece. But outside of that... So, anyway, mine, like I said, one of the biggest one, but then I would say there's one to follow, but one of the biggest ones is when we were married because... I mean, then and there, I had a responsibility, right? Because that's how I looked at marriage. As the husband, you are responsible for not only leading your home, but also providing as well. And so I was like, oh, snap. And at the time, I didn't have like a 9-to-5 or like a clock-in job scenario. I had like a in-home situation because my parents are just that loving and gracious. But nonetheless, I was like, okay, I got to find a job. And so thankfully, at our church, they were doing a job fair, and at the job fair they were offering jobs, and so I just happened to sit in front of somebody that also went to the church, and we connected, and I had a job like that, so that was beautiful. But then beyond that transition of, like, living with somebody is thing of its own. And it was just fun. At the end of the day, it was fun. But then it was like, man, is she like still here? That was a part of my thought, because I was just used to being by myself. I was raised in a home as the only child, and so I didn't have to share anything. I didn't have to share my room. I didn't have to share the bathroom. I didn't have to share the closet. It was just mine. I had mine, and it was known it was mine. And so, having a spouse is like, no, yours, you have no longer yours. You have like our stuff. And then like, I think our first apartment, we were at Capitol Gateway. And so
it was a 1-bedroom.
It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. And that grew us, because we had to learn how to work together and things like that. I learned a lot about women that I didn't know. But, as far as like hair and stuff, right? Eliminate the thoughts that you may or may not have. But nonetheless, learn about that and things like that. So that was a fun transition. But then after that, I would say once we had Rain, like that was a big transition as well, because it's like, wow, there's another human being, a baby human being that I am the father, right? Because, with you, right, you have a mother, you have a father. And so push come to shove, you can go to them. But not this baby. I'm the baby's father. So it's like, I'm responsible. And so like that was a huge moment that I could only thank God for. But that was like a huge transition that opened my eyes up to not only the future, but what I need to do presently to get her, Rain was the first, to ultimately the lifestyle that we ultimately want her to have. Like I said ultimately so many times, but ultimately y'all get it. And with it all, like from there it's like, okay, cool. But now, like I said, we're in a day and age where, which I'm excited to get to this point, where people are doing the great, I don't know why I want to keep saying great migration or great recession.
Just say some people are resigning.
Resigning. I mean, I'm just want to read the headlines. The headline says I
don't know if the headline is still like a thing though.
Well, it still was, like, even like it was back in the day. So like back in the day when you couldn't make international calls. But nonetheless, back in the day when people were resigning, the great resignation. Thank you, Father, for giving me those words. And so, that was something that you did do, of course, after us having conversations, of course, after you praying, making sure it was the right thing to do. But once you made that transition, right, which we're still in the year of the transition, with January being the last month of working a, regular 9-to-5, but now being a total entrepreneur and doing entrepreneur things. So what went into, I'm gonna just ask like the thought process of making that transition, because I'm sure other people may want to do it, have thought about doing it, kind of like double dutch, like should I do it, should I not, yada yada yada. But like, what was like that stake in the ground? This is what I need to do.
Honestly, God.
Boom.
Like,
sounds simple.
Yeah. It was just God. Like for me, for my situation, it was something I knew He was telling me to do.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Right. So did it take you a while to like come into grips with, okay, God, you said it, so let me do it?
Yeah, it definitely did.
Oh, okay.
There was different stages. Like, is this what God is saying? Then it was like, well, I don't know how Ricky's gonna feel about that. Then talking to Ricky, he was like, no, I mean, fine, do whatever you feel like God's telling you to do. Period. So then it was like, oh man, okay. So God, did you really say that? Like now, especially, and I think even then, just, I don't want to say the weight, but just the consciousness of, it's not just me on a whim moving to a different state or a different country or doing whatever thing I'm doing, willing to take a responsibility. It's like, well, no, I have a family. I have a husband. I have kids. And I can't just do things. And I think that's always made me feel really flexible and fluid and available to transition, because I always felt like if I did the wrong thing, I could just do something else. Right. That was something my dad always said. Correct. If you make a wrong decision, just make another decision. Boom. And when it's just you, that's really easy. True. Because like, there's been times where just me made a decision and it landed me living in an apartment with somebody else for, in Atlanta, a friend for a couple weeks just to figure some stuff out. 1 to 8. Right. Sharing a twin bed. Like, right. With just me, I can do that. And then I can make another decision in the near future that helps, transition that situation. but I can't take myself and you and the kids to a twin bed with a friend in a room, and you know what I mean? So I think that was a thought that I definitely had to work through. So it was just like, okay, God, I wanna make sure this is you. You know, before I step out and make this decision. Yeah. And so I did, you know, I made sure, like, this is definitely God. Right. And I feel confident even now, knowing, like, no, it was definitely God.
Today's episode is sponsored by A Purposeful Pursuit, which is my wife's YouTube channel, which you can go on there, ladies or gentlemen, if you're single and need any advice on how to go from being single to being married, okay? It's a YouTube channel for you. And make sure you comment down below when you do go to the channel, when you do check things out. Let her know you're there. Let her know where you came from. And hopefully you can find you a spouse, okay? Because that's what we all about. Helping people go from single to married, okay? So go ahead and go there. Let's go! Even in that transition and things like that, knowing it was God, how has it been, right? So now we're probably 4 months into it. How would you say that transition is still building up who you are and where you are today and the mentality that you may have to have?
So I would say it's definitely a transition that's continuing to transition.
Absolutely. Which is the great part of having the conversation.
I feel like one of the things, for me particularly, in resigning that I'm coming into the knowledge of more and more was God needed to get me in a space where I could hear. Prior to me resigning, I would call and talk to one of my close friends, and I would just tell her, like, I feel like I'm so overwhelmed or bombarded that I can't even hear. Yeah. Like, I can't hear. Yeah. And so I feel like God definitely needed to just kind of extract me and get me in a place where I could hear his voice and what he was saying concerning my life and what he wanted me to do. And I know even when I first transitioned, I had a lot of plans about what I was going to be doing. And Ricky would come home and he'd be like, "What did you do today?" I'd be like, "Nothing." And it was literally like God told me, like, "Chrystle, you need to stop." Like, he was just like, "Stop." But he just kept impressing that on me. And he's like, "You need to stop." And so at first I was trying to still do a lot, but then eventually I yielded to God's voice and I was like, okay, I'm just going to stop. And probably for like a week or two, like I really just kind of like, I put pause on like everything. And then that's when God really started talking to me and I was able to finish writing a book and some other things. And so, I know for me it was important for me to be extracted just so I could start to really hear clearly from God concerning some things again. And I'm still transitioning because it's like you hear and you keep hearing. I know you said, like, what does it take to do that? I would say, like, one of the things, if you're considering resigning, one of the things that it takes is, I would say it's important to have a word from God, because I'm also the person that always told people, like, don't quit one job before you have another one, like, you're an adult now. So unless you have a word from God to do that, don't do that. Just call being responsible. The other thing that I would say that it takes is you can't be a lazy person.
Very true. And
you can't be a lazy person. Yeah, you can't be a lazy person and an entrepreneur, because there are times and days where I want to take off, but I need to get things done, and so I get them done, because if I don't get them done, I'm not going to still get a check at the end of the week and say I'll do it next week. You don't get the check if you don't do the thing, if you're an entrepreneur. So there's that.
There's growth, ladies and gentlemen. There's growth.
And like I said, I took that time when I needed to take that time because I knew that was what God wanted me to do. But and then there are still days where I know it's like I need to. There's definitely still a balance in entrepreneurship of you shouldn't work 7 days a week. You need that time to refresh and be able to be of clear mind so you can hear from God. So you can talk to him. Even God rested in creation on the seventh day. So you should still find balance and rest. So that's something I would say that it takes, though, understanding the importance of doing the things that you need to do. And I would say even having an idea of what you want to do. Even if it shifts, even if it changes, God works and does some things with that, that's fine. But you should have a starting place, at least in your mind, of where you want to go and what you want to do. So you're not then just trying to think of something from day one. Like, at least have an idea.
No, that's good. Even with the respect of the idea scenario, because even as you were saying that, I was just thinking personally how even this podcast is a product of transforming and change and things like that and transitioning, because when I talked to Chrystle about making the transition and the name change and things like that, she was a little apprehensive in the beginning, which I get, right? Because I mean, how many changes are you going to do what you want to do? But I know even in starting, I was like, well, with the podcast, when I initially started, I just want to do a podcast. I just want to talk. I want to be on radio. I want to do this first just to get my feet wet and get a feel for everything. And so, hey, boom, this is where I am. And so then I was like, okay, I need to be more structured. I personally, Ricky, love structure. And so I then took on the structure of the Pursuit of Destiny podcast scenario, where we were doing affirmations, then we were talking about it on a personal perspective, then we're going to talk about it on a business perspective, because those were the different avenues and areas that I was passionate and am still passionate about. But then I was like, okay, I want to be like relaxed. I want to be me. I want to do me way, right? And so I was like, okay, we have to change these things up. All that to say, it's just different transitions, and all that to say, even to the point of what Pastor Poe would say is make a decision. Make another decision at the end of the day. Like, yes, the decision first was to get started, but then it transitioned to, okay, let me be more structured, and now I have a regimen. But now the transition is, all right, let me just be me. And so now it's the Ricky Jones Jr. podcast, where I feel like I could be free to be me and do it me way. And so there's that. But even on our other I would say this. Go ahead.
I wasn't apprehensive of you doing the podcast your way or doing the Ricky Jones Jr. show. So I don't want it to come off like I was apprehensive of what you're doing. I 100% supported that. I was just like, maybe don't make an announcement, because you've multiple times like announced what you're doing with the show. And so I just was like, no, just do whatever you want to do. So I wasn't apprehensive or opposed to the actual idea of what you're doing now, though.
Gotcha.
I was always supportive of that.
Gotcha. See, I like a grand opening, so, you know, boom, you get to hear both ways at the end of the day. But when I say both ways, like what she said, but then also my interpretation of what she says, which happens in marriages. But even in that, I will say that there was, even within marriage, there are transitions that happen with you as an individual. And so, like I said, me being more like calculated and methodical is who I am. But Chrystle is definitely one that, even as she has expressed, she'll make a change. She'll make a decision and live with the decision that she makes. And, you know, now being one with her, I'm kind of like that too. And so all that to say, like, different transitions happen for various ways, but with it all, we make the transition, but do it in a way that we're okay with the decisions that we make. And I was even about to say, like, with our various YouTubes, we have I'm gonna call it four functioning YouTube channels, but they all came out of one. They just transitioned from the different things that we were doing, things that we were passionate about, things that we felt like were purposeful in our lives to do. And so boom, one turned into four. And, you know, our desires is to stop there, but the list could go on. But I'm saying that to say, like, transitions happen for various ways, but it's okay, because you'll find a rhythm. You'll find a way to get things done. I was just talking to my uncle and mom today, but in the conversation, he was just saying, like, man, like, you all are consistent with your YouTube channels, and that's the hardest part, which is very true. A lot of people fall off from doing various things because of consistency. But that was something that I saw from my father, but then to come down here in Tampa to hear from Crystle's father as well, it's cool. I you know, and talking to my dad too, I was like, man, like, Dad, you did a lot of things and showed me things, not necessarily putting words to those things, but coming here, Pastor Poe put a lot of words to what he said and things like that. And one of his things was consistency is the key to breakthrough. And so just being consistent in whatever transition that you're doing for a longer period of time than the first sign of dilemma comes up, like, will help you in so many different ways and allow for you to see the actual breakthrough that you ultimately want to have in the midst of that transition. So, you know, we make transitions, we make changes, we reface, rebrand is what happens, right? Even Nike doesn't have that same swoosh and Nike up under each and every shirt. No, they transition to different looks, different brands, yada yada yada. The list goes on, and so you will as well. Talking to my lovely wife, one of the greatest, I won't say greatest, but one of the current transformations that she has partaken in is the transition not only into entrepreneurship, but then having a speaking engagement and saying, like, now it's being interesting being known and called an author and a public speaker. So, like, knowing that those two things are added to your repertoire and how some people may just know you as those, like, how would you say that transition has affected you so far? Knowing that it's still new, but the speaking part, but the author, you've been an author, you've written, this is your second book you've written, but like, how would you say you've taken on?
I mean, I think it's fine taking it on. I don't know, I don't really think about it much, I guess, unless I'm actively doing it. I think it, especially for their writing, it's cool because it shows the hard work I've been doing. Because I wrote my first book years ago, so it's cool in that sense. I think with the public speaking, it's an adjustment because it's just not I won't say my preference, but it's just not. I'm not one of those people that in my core dreams of being on big stages. I do it. I'm willing to do it out of necessity to understand it allows me to talk to more people at once. So yeah.
Boom. And so, are there any other transitions that you are working through or dealing with the current that you may feel is necessary for those that are listening to help them?
No, not really. If anything, I would say just hear and keep hearing. Life is a series of transitions. So, as soon as you believe you've arrived in one place, there's going to be an opportunity to transition to another place. So,
that's true.
Hear and keep hearing.
Boom. Well, with that, I appreciate you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us and speaking with us on the topic of transitions, because, you know, I knew you had quite a few that you had going on, but at the end of the day, had some insight on how to help others as they are as well dealing with transition. So, much appreciated, ma'am.
Yes.
All right, great people. So for this version of Boom or Buzz, it's going to be with this here tool. Let me get a little bit closer to the camera. And for those that are listening on the podcast, this here tool that I am holding is known as an oral brush, okay? But more than anything, it's a tongue scraper, which I'm sure a lot of people that you may know, I'm not talking about you, but people that you may know have probably never felt this. Now, this is something that I think is necessary for everybody to have, largely because as you scrape your tongue after you brush your tongue and floss your teeth and, you know, use the gargle and all that good stuff. What is it called? It's not even called gargle. It's called mouthwash. When you use the mouthwash, this is something that you want to have in your repertoire as well, because it's going to get away those nasty. I don't even know what it's called, but it's a nasty film that comes along your tongue and things like that as you eat various foods. So it's something that you want to have, okay? It's going to keep your breath fresh, but then also make your experience enjoyable when you are talking to other people, especially in close proximity. So if you're wondering why your breath may be stink, it's because you don't have an oral brush, okay? So obviously this one gets a boom, because my Lord, it has radically transformed my life, but I'm not going to act brand new. It's not something that I've had all my life. This is something that I had because my dentist, dentist hygienist, she was cleaning my mouth and all that good stuff, cleaning my teeth, and she was like, hey man, like, you have a tongue scraper? I was like, no, I don't have no tongue scraper. What's a tongue scraper? And she was like, oh, you need to go get one. Like, go get one right now. And I was like, okay, cool. And I've been scraping, my gosh, daily, this film just go into the sink. So with that being said, a little quick plug, but I'm trying to help you at the same time. Go and get you a Aura brush. Okay, I found this at Walmart. Shouts out to them for having everything at a low price, as they say. And so you can go and get one too. So boom to the big old Aura brush, great people. So and with it all, I thank you all. I appreciate you all, and as well, shouts out to my lovely wife, Miss Chrystle Jones, for being on this here podcast episode today, because she makes my life just a little bit better. Okay. And hopefully yours as well. So in whatever transition you are dealing with, definitely know that you have somebody that is here for you, and that will be us here with you to talk you through it, if that is something that you need or want for us to do. But in the meantime, in between time, know that God is with you and never leave you, nor forsake you, and always hear from him when you're trying to make the next decision to do whatever it is you feel like you should do. Okay? Ask, pray, and then hear and do. So with that being said, I love you all. I appreciate you all. Until the next video, have fun, great people. Live life, because life is to be lived.